What's up everyone and welcome to another Warframe video. Today we're going to be continuing our look at the frames that got the biggest glow up in the recent Techrot Encore update. This video is going to focus on our very own cat lady, the one and only Khora Prime. Kora was one of the ones that benefited from stat stick melee weapons the most and allowed her to do some really silly things from a damage perspective, so a removal of this interaction in favour of frame specific moddable weapons was always going to be somewhat of a potentially controversial thing for her. So how has she fared? Well, to be able to truly get into it, let's do a quick refresher on the abilities we're going to be leveraging in this build. Her first ability, Whip Claw, is the one that's been changed the most by the stat stick removal. She whips the ground wherever the reticule is aimed, hitting enemies in a radius around the strike, which can be increased with the use of range mods. Much like the other exalted weapons, it also gets a new pseudo-melee combo counter, which is affected by combo duration mods and can influence mods such as Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds. Second ability is Ensnare. You're going to bind a target with your whips, which then is going to branch out and pull enemies in which are in its line of sight, binding them to the original target. This allows for a bunching of entire groups and an absolute slaughter when you hit them with Whip Claw. Simple but very effective ability. Then we have her third ability, Venari. Venari is her special pet cat, which has undergone so many enormous changes over the last couple of years, including the Companion 2.0 rework, plus a ton of new mods for her, all of which has changed Venari into an absolutely bonkers powerhouse of a companion. When modded, you can get two-way healing with Kora, health orb generation, shadow versions of itself that can attack in an area that also benefit from its own mods, armor strip, knockdown. She's incredibly powerful and a huge part of the build. Her 4 though, I have replaced on this build with Zarta's Whisper. This allows the opportunity to pump out some extra damage because Zarta's effectively hits a second time and has a longer duration than Raw, so our not amazing duration isn't quite so noticeable. That reduced duration really does hurt a lot of potential helmet options out here, but honestly Zarta's was both beneficial and the least impacted by the rest of our modding. Talking of the build, this is probably the longest section of the video because we have 4 separate things to go through with the builds: Khora Prime, her whip, Venari and her claws. So let's start with Kora herself. We're going to push survivability with a triple umbral adaptation setup. Sadly this is going to require double umbral. I do have triple on here from an old build, but with more optimized polarities you can reduce that down. Then we're going to push our range up a bit with it overextended, double efficiency mods in Streamline and Fleeting to reduce the cost to spam Whip Claw, because we're running Accumulating Whip Claw as our augment. It actually reads, the augment itself reads as if it's giving you a melee damage buff, but it's actually an additive power strength buff. But since we're building a bit of range, it's super easy to keep this augment up at all times, so it is a fantastic increase in our damage. Corrosive Projection is going to be our aura to deal with some of that pesky armor on high levels, and then Prime Sure-Footed because getting knocked down quite frankly sucks. Then we have our support part of the build, Arcanes and Shards. Arcane Fury for melee damage, which does affect our whip, and then Blessing for more health when we pick up health orbs, something we're going to be doing a lot with Venari and our companion, in this case Diriga, both with Synth Deconstruct generating them like crazy. Shards for this build, 2 reds, both of which are power duration to help reduce the pain that running duration or reduced duration brings. 2 blues, both of which are going to be armor for additional survivability. And then a violet shard running the equilibrium style buff, where you get energy from health pickups and vice versa, which running alongside max efficiency really does help us spam our abilities to our heart's content. Then we have the whip, and there's not really a lot particularly special going on here. It's high crit with toxin damage. We're running toxin to bypass shields. There is a couple of interesting things to note though. Primed Reach does affect the AoE of the whip, so that's pretty much an auto include, but doesn't get factored into the stats when you look at the abilities, at least from what I can tell. Then we have melee exposure, which gives us corrosive damage on our melee for casting our abilities, which we're going to be doing constantly here anyway, so it really is a bit of a no-brainer pick to have on here. But the thing is, the frame and the melee aren't really the most interesting part of the build for the most part. It's Venari where the build really starts rounding out. Link Health and Link Fibre are also included for survivability, as is Primed Animal Instinct. No fetch though, since Vacuum will be on our other companion. Then we're running Hunter Recovery and Primed Pack Leader. This combination means you are both shoveling health into Venari, but also Venari is going to be shoveling health back into Khora Prime. And this means you're going to have almost constant healing up at all times, and it's quite hard to take either of them down. If Venari does happen to go down though, we have Tenacious Bond to reduce the respawn time, but we have Tech Assault on here to have a 60% chance to avoid that death entirely in the first place. So with the healing and these two mods, Venari really shouldn't ever die, to be perfectly honest with you. Then we have Synth Deconstruct, which is going to be generating health orbs like crazy. Momentous Bond for more damage on an Eximus kill, which at high level is, well, basically constant. And then Territorial Aggression, which places down an AoE on the ground, and all the enemies within it have a 30% chance to be attacked by a shadow clone of Venari, with all of Venari's stats, and it also inherits all of the weapon modding as well, meaning they hit as hard as Venari. It's a really, really interesting mod. It's the first time I messed about with it, really, and I am glad that I did. Her claws are also pretty interesting to mod. We're starting with her stance, the protective stance, and this is hugely important. This is going to keep Venari close to us all times, really focusing on enemies around us, and then we can take advantage of that. Not only that, but this also means all her attacks get 4 forced puncture procs, reducing enemy damage and giving subsequent attacks from Venari 100% critical chance. Then we have damage and crit from Bite and Maul, pure slash damage and a damage boost from precision conditioning. Sepsis claws are giving us massive toxin damage. Radon claws, which is going to give us additional radiation damage for armored enemies which are weak to that. Then we have our triple threat that all work together. Bellringer, which means any enemy attacked gets knocked down and impact procs applied. Swipe, which means every attack can hit multiple enemies, but also will strip their armor. And then Magnetic Strike, which applies a magnetic proc when enemies get an impact proc applied. So you can probably see where this is going. Multiple enemies get hit by Venari, they strip all their armor, they apply 4 puncture procs from the stance, it gets knocked down by Bellringer, and then the impact procs get applied, and then Magnetic Strike applies magnetic procs to all of those hit by those impact procs. So all enemies hit by Venari, regardless of their faction, get all of their defenses stripped and their damage reduced, which is one hell of a combo and one that I like a huge amount. So with all that said and done, what do I think of the new Khora Prime? Well, honestly, while I do think her damage output is definitely less than it used to be, in fact it's a lot less than it used to be, due to some unintended interactions with her whip claw that did actually finally end up getting fixed, I by no means think that she is weak now, or not good. In fact, I think quite the opposite. In fact, I think she is one of the most interesting and well-rounded frames in the game. While we have no direct control over Venari, well, not really. You have the 3, but it doesn't really count as control because the AI will do whatever it wants. The potential interactions on the frame, her pet, both of their weapons, the companion, and the weapons you put on the frame itself, the potential interactions are enormous. There's probably a lot more that can be done. In fact, this is definitely not the build you would use to get the absolute max damage out of Whipclaw. However, what this build is one of the hardest frames to die on because of the damage she can put out. It easily deals with the hardest enemies out there, plus the healing loops, energy and health generation loops. It's all so phenomenally synergetic and provides one of the most balanced frames I think I've ever played. Much like Atlas though, she is a kind of a bit RSI inducing with the spamming of her first ability, but if you can deal with that, I think you'll have a fantastic time. Now I do sympathise with those who love the old Khora Prime. She definitely cannot match the damage she was able to do before, but at the same time she has more than enough damage, even on a build like this, to comfortably deal with anything you throw at her, and honestly, just be incredibly comfortable playing her. I have put up some jank builds that, while powerful, absolutely suck to play. The completely invincible Garuda I put up a couple years ago really comes to mind like that. But not Kora. She is chill, and one I'm definitely going to be putting quite a lot of time into. So I hope you enjoyed this look at the new Khora Prime build. Please let me know if there's anyone you would like to see me cover in the comments below, or if you have any other ways or suggestions for building Kora. I'm always interested to hear your thoughts. But for now, many thanks for watching. I hope you all have a fantastic week, and I shall catch you in the next video.